So why am I here? I'm here to glorify him and build his kingdom. The way I play that out and the way you play that out is going to look a little different because we're supposed to. We're all a part of a body. How many of you are fans of the show The Office? How many of you, somebody got loud there, how many of you are not fans of the show The Office? I tend to fall into that category a little bit, just being honest. But here's the thing that I found about the show The Office. You're usually either one or the other. Right, like there are people that love that show, and then there's like the rest of us that are like, I don't know that I fully get it. But here's the thing about the people that have loved, they did this survey, and this is not my information, they did this survey, and here's what they asked them why they connected with, why they liked it, and they said this, they said because it's so relatable, because they could relate. Now, if you've watched the show The Office, you know that it's really a show about nothing. And I don't mean that even rude, like that's what it is, like a show about people just showing up and just like, There's no direction it's going. There's no purpose it's going. Like it's just a show about people that show up and they kind of follow them at work, in the office, right? And it's interesting to me that so many people, all of us at times maybe, can say, I can relate. I can relate. I just kind of show up and I don't know where I'm going. I don't know the direction. I don't know the purpose. Or maybe we find ourselves like the old illustration that you've heard before, but like the hamster on the wheel. And man, you're busy. Like my guess is if I asked and had time, how many of you are busy, 90% of you would raise your hand and say you're busy. But that hamster on that wheel is extremely busy. Like that's the truth. Like that guy's going, right? And he's moving. And he could go all day long. And at the end of the day, he could get off that wheel and say, man, I was busy today. And he'd be absolutely right and not accomplish one thing. And not move one spot from where he started the day and not be productive in any way. Our executive pastor, Pastor Jonathan, one of his favorite questions to ask people, and I love it when they say, I'm busy, is yes, but are you productive? Because those can be two different things, right? Like we can find ourselves busy. And sometimes I think we find ourselves busy and yet we wonder if we're being productive. We're like, did I just get on that wheel and spin all day long? And then like, I don't know, I just went. But like, I don't know that we actually accomplished what God wanted us to accomplish or not. Have you ever felt like that? And you just wonder, like, there's got to be more than just climbing on this wheel again tomorrow morning and going busy again. And so I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about your calling. And I want to use that word, and we've used it a couple of times in the last few weeks, but I want to actually define it for you. Up on the screen, this will be here. A calling is a life purpose God has appointed for you in order to glorify him and build his kingdom. Notice what it does not say. It does not say in order for you to look good, or in order for you to go make a lot of money, or in order for you to admire it, or in order for others to admire it. It's in order to glorify him and build his kingdom. So why am I here? I'm here to glorify him and build his kingdom. End of story. End of story. Now, my purpose in doing that, the calling, that the way I play that out and the way you play that out is going to look a little different because we're supposed to. We're all a part of a body. And thankfully, we don't all play the same part in the body, right? We don't need 1,000 feet, but we need a few, or at least two, right? Like, if you had more than two, it might be weird. We need some. Right? Like we need to understand that we all play a part in it, and we all have a purpose. Here's the thing: sometimes we find ourselves maybe not fulfilling the purpose, and it can get frustrating. How many of you have a treadmill or an exercise bike in your house that fulfills a different purpose than it was built for? Anybody? You don't have to raise your hand on that. Sometimes there are things that are built for one thing and get used for other things. Are you hearing me? Sometimes we look up and we're like, I don't think this is what I was built for. And yet this is what's happening in my life. I think that treadmill is probably like, man, I'm the most expensive clothes hanger you could have ever bought. Right? Like there are cheaper ways to do this. Right? But if this is what you want me to do, okay, throw your shirt on me, right? And we'll be all right. Like, but God has a purpose and a calling for us that is bigger sometimes. So I want to look at two stories, and I want to just dive in real quick to these stories. I say dive in. We're going to kind of hit them from a big level, from just a high level. But I want to look at two stories that many of you have already heard. Some of you may know. The first one is the story of Joseph. Okay, and I want to start it with this. So Joseph, and I'm just going to kind of tell you about it. Joseph was a son of a man named Jacob, or Israel, the Bible calls him here. And Joseph was one of 12 sons. And Joseph, it literally says, he was the one that his father loved the most. And his father, in order to show that, made him a robe of many colors. And he wore that robe. And it says his brothers hated him because they realized that their dad loved him more than themselves. And so Joseph finds himself in this dynamic where his father loves him very much. His brothers can't stand him. They hate him. And then he begins to have dreams. And here's the dreams he has. He has this dream that he and his brothers are out gathering the wheat, and they're making them into sheaves, which are like some, the actual bundles of them, okay? They're making them into some bundles. And his bundle all of a sudden rises up real tall, and all the brothers' bundle bows down to his bundle. That's one dream. Then the next night he has another dream that the sun, the moon, and the stars bow down and worship him. And he decides, in all his maturity and wisdom, to go tell his brothers that hate him about these two dreams, right? Like, I don't know exactly where the thought was that this was a great idea, but let me go tell these brothers that can't stand me how one day they're going to bow down to me. That sounds like a good idea. So he decides to do that, okay? And I'm going to pause for a minute on this story. We'll come back to it, but here's what I want you to grasp. Joseph began with these dreams to get a glimpse that he had a future and a purpose in his life that was bigger than what he was currently walking in. Are you understanding that? He begins to grasp that at this point. Now, he may not be handling things the right way. How many of you have ever grasped something and yet still mishandled something? Yeah. May not be handling it all the right way, but he's beginning to grasp that there's a calling on his life. There's a purpose there. Now, I want to tell you about another story about King David, except I want to talk to you about before he was king, about David. Okay? And here's the story of David. And I'm just going to tell you this too, and then I'm going to read a couple of verses here about the story of David to you, but here's what I want you to hear here. David was the youngest boy of a man named Jesse. And Samuel's a prophet in the land, and Saul's the current king. And God speaks to Samuel, and he says, Samuel, I want you to go. He said, I'm tired of Saul being king. I want you to go to Jesse's house, and I want you to look at his sons, because one of them I'm fixing to name the next king. And Samuel says this. In fact, let's just read some of this, okay? Because I want you to hear this. So I'm going to pick this up in verse number 2. It says, and Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. Now, I want you to understand this. Samuel's the prophet, and he's fixing to go to a man's house and declare that one of these young men is going to be the next king. And he's scared, though, because the current king is still there. And he realizes that puts his life in jeopardy to go tell people that this man's going to be the king when there is a current king. The current king's not going to like this. Are you following me? Okay. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. And invite Jesse, who's the dad, to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me him whom I declare to you. Samuel did what the Lord commanded. Stop right there. Look at those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. Samuel did what the Lord commanded. I just want you to stop for a minute and think about that. In the midst of fear, in the midst of risking his life, in the midst of maybe going ahead and doing something that was going to ultimately either get him killed or get him in bad shape with the current king, God said do it. So Samuel did it. I was preparing for this message this week, and I was reading through that, and God just stopped me right there. And he just said these words, and so I just want to declare this to you. This may have been just for me, but he said, Jansen, sometimes it's just real simple, and you overcome. Just do what I say. Just do what I command you. Samuel just said, okay. Like, I don't really know how this is all going to play out. I know there's risk involved, but God said go, so I'm going. And maybe today that's what somebody in the room, maybe me included, just needs to hear is just do what God says.